Today, with the inspiration of the second inauguration of President Obama fresh in our minds, we renew our effort to fulfill the promise of prosperity for every American. The theme of yesterday's inauguration was faith in America's future. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose birth and life we also celebrated yesterday, once said, quote, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase," close quote. I have faith that the members of the 113th Congress will bring this nation closer to realizing the promise of prosperity. The last Congress was too often characterized by sharp political divides that hampered efforts to foster success for all Americans. I'm hopeful and cautiously optimistic that the 113th Congress will be characterized not by our divisions, but by our renewed commitment to cooperation and compromise. I urge every woman and every man fortunate enough to serve in this chamber to remember it is possible to hold fast to your principles while making the compromises necessary to move our country forward. Democrats will hold fast to the guiding principle that a strong middle class and an opportunity for every American to enter the middle class is the key to this nation's success. Democrats will stand strong for that standard of balance. And we'll remain resolute in the pursuit of fairness for all Americans, regardless of where they were born or the color of their skin, regardless of the size of their bank accounts, regardless of their religion or their sexual orientation. Those principles will direct our course as we introduce our first 10 bills today, a tradition we've had in the United States Senate. That is, the majority party introduces the first 10 bills. And as we mend our broken immigration system, strengthen our schools, and rebuild our roads and bridges, we'll look to other measures that are included in those 10 bills. These principles will be foremost in our minds as we balance the right to bear arms with the right of every child to grow up safe from gun violence. Those principles will be our North Star as we work to end wasteful tax loopholes and balance thoughtful spending reductions with revenue from the wealthiest among us. And those principles will point the way as we work to ensure that this country's uniformed service members never struggle to find employment when their military duties end. Through every struggle and every triumph, those principles must be our guide. Not a single piece of important legislation can pass the Senate or become law without the votes of both Democrats and Republicans. So we'll be willing to compromise and work with our colleagues across the aisle. Unfortunately, a number of bipartisan bills passed the Senate during the last Congress. They were never acted upon by the House of Representatives. So this year, the Senate will revisit some of those legislative priorities that passed on a bipartisan basis here. We'll again take up the violence against women. This is an important piece of legislation that has expired. We'll take up the Farm Bill, which was a revolutionary piece of legislation that would save the country up to $24 billion. We would again revisit the historic reforms to save the United States Postal Service and legislation to make whole the victims of Hurricane Sandy. Each of these initiatives passed the Senate on a bipartisan basis after deliberation and debate during the last Congress, but was left to languish by the House. The Senate will continue to help our fellow Americans recover from Hurricane Sandy before another similar disaster strikes. Hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses were destroyed in New York, New Jersey, and New England, and tens of thousands of Americans were left homeless by this destructive storm. We have a responsibility to aid our countrymen as they rebuild their lives and their communities, as we have after terrible floods, fires, and storms in other parts of our nation. Once we complete that vital legislation, the Senate will take action to make this institution that we all love, the United States Senate, work more effectively. We'll consider changes to the Senate rules. Because this matter warrants additional debate, today we'll follow the precedent set in 2005 and again in 2011. We reserve the right of all senators to propose changes to the Senate rules. And we will explicitly not acquiesce in the carrying over of all the rules from the last Congress. It's my intention that the Senate will recess today, rather than adjourn, to continue the same legislative day and allow this important rules discussion to continue later this month. I'm hopeful and cautiously optimistic that the Republican leader and I will reach an agreement that allows the Senate to operate more effectively in the coming months.